Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek Podcast number 288. And with us in Studio C at MotorWeek World Headquarters, we have our over-the-edge reporter, Greg Carlos, our digital producer, Jessica Ray, and a special guest, a host from Your Drive, Dan Maffett. Dan, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to get to a lot of stuff today. We've got vehicles to talk about, a lightning round, a viewer question, but we're going to start with Dan because Dan is new to the MotorWeek fold, and we've aired a couple of the segments of your segments on Your Drive so far, and I must say, to very good reviews, which is great. But I really want to get into what you bring to our Car Care series. We've never had someone as a host before, or even a major contributor, who is into building show cars, car design, exterior modifications. We've covered it, but that's you. That's what you do. So I kind of want to start with something that's really basics. You know, a lot of people that watch MotorWeek, they've bought something old that they want to recondition. They've maybe found that so-called barn find, whatever, and they want to turn it into a show car, something they can take, even if it's just to weekend events like Cars and Coffees. Where do they start? How do they do it on a budget? If someone comes to you and say, I've got something I really want to show off, where do they start?
Well, the first thing I always tell anyone that's interested in that process is find the most solid car you can start with. The biggest drain on any budget for a build is rust repair.
I was going to ask you, so you're really talking about rust.
That is the biggest.
Cancer of the automobile.
Yeah, if you can get a car from out west, do it, because we'll have spots of rust. We'll have spots of rust that are, you know, a whole quarter panel out here, and we think it's not that bad. Out there, if they have a dime of rust, they think it's awful. So, you know, they don't see the rust like we do.
Because first of all, they don't have the weather we have, and they don't use corrosive salt and all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, all of that. And so any money you think you're going to save by getting something that's really bad shape, you're going to waste it on metal because there's very few people that can do rust repair to the quality of a show car.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that can make it look good, lipstick on a pig, but but you know, you need someone who's a craftsman to do that kind of work, and that's where you start.
What next? What's the second?
Once you get the body where you want it and it's ready for, you know, paint and primer and things like this, that's when you kind of know, okay, we have a direction, we're going to go, plan out the build, do a drawing, do a rendering, have a cohesive idea for everything from the inside to the outside, because
make a list,
colors, wheels choices, everything, because everything down to, you know, the material of the seats, the top, the colors, all those are going to play with each other. If you paint the car blue and then decide you want to do, you know, yellow interior, it's going to look really weird. So you want to make sure you have a whole idea when you start, and it really depends on the caliber of show you're going to. If you're doing a Cars and Coffee weekend show at a cruise night, you don't have to be that particular. But if you're doing something like the Autorama, the Riddler Award, you know, if you're not putting 1.2, 1.3 million into your car, you're not a contender.
Oh. Yeah, well, I'm not sure how many of our viewers have got that kind of dough. But, okay, so you've got a solid piece of machinery. I assume that, you know, they've got someone that knows what they're doing about paint, not getting an ex-Earl Scheib employee or something like that. And the interior, where do you suggest people go for the pieces, either trim on the outside or the interior, to make the car, to bring the car back to at least the OEM level? Because, you know, if you got something old, that's hard. You don't go to a dealer and get it, and you don't even go to a normal auto parts store. Right.
So there's a lot of specialist companies out there that reproduce the most popular vehicles. They reproduce every piece from inside, outside, trim. We just finished up a 66 Econoline Ford Falcon Club wagon.
Interesting, right?
No one makes anything for it.
Yeah.
It was all a one-year thing that they did to try to compete with the Volkswagen bus for the most windows. So they put 16 windows in it, and we're like, yeah, we won. And then Volkswagen came out the next year with their 23, and the van stopped. So no one makes any pieces for it. So anything you do has to be custom hand built or refurbished from a junk car that you find.
Yeah, that's big bucks.
That's very big bucks. So the best thing is to find a company that specializes in reproducing those original parts.
I know in our Mid-Atlantic area, the mecca is Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and all of the different shows they do throughout the year. I've been going up there, I guess, for almost ever. And it's a great place. Even if they don't have the part, you can usually find someone who's a vendor.
That's a big thing because the swap meets like that, big shows that have huge swap meets like Carlisle or Pomona, guys show up with trucks and trailers full of just random parts they've pulled out of barns, out of junkyards, and you might find a bracket that you've been looking for 10 years in some guy's junk pile there.
Let's go to and let's use that as a starting point, though, to go another route. One of the segments you've just done for us is on resto modding. Retro modding. And kind of explain what that is. And when someone comes to you and wants to do some resto modding, where do you start there?
So resto modding is pretty much taking the best of today's technology and putting it in the best looking cars of all time, which are
the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever.
Whatever you got. My favorites are 70 younger.
Of course.
I like those cars.
What they used to call the heyday of Detroit.
I mean, the designers then had unlimited budgets and unlimited time to just do what they wanted.
And they made them look different every year. Which was basically the way they marketed. I mean, they didn't want you. They wanted you to buy every couple of years.
The new everything.
Yeah.
So you take the classic car that someone's loved, that's wanted that car since they were in high school when they saw someone else driving it, and then they get it and they don't like how it drives because it doesn't drive like their new BMW or their Audi.
Big surprise here.
So you take all the new suspension, the new electronics, the new fuel injection, everything, even the new engines, and put them into this old car. I mean, we did a 69 Camaro with a brand new Corvette LS3 in it. So he was driving it on a road trip and started getting a code, went to a Chevy dealer, they plugged up, found out it was a fouled plug, and he was able to fix it and get back on the road.
Well, actually, I give credit to that Chevy dealer for even basically letting him in the shop.
Yeah. And I called the dealer. I was like, hey, look, I have a customer coming. This is what's going on.
You smoothed the way.
There's a port underneath the dash on the left side. Plug up to it, just see what it says. And luckily, it was something simple. It was just, it fouled up one of the plugs. But
when people come to you, do they start with the engine or do they work on the suspension and steering? Because to me, it's suspension and steering on older cars that really leaves you cold, and brakes.
Yeah, usually it's a snowball effect. Usually it's safety. We're paramount on safety first. So if you have a guy that comes in that doesn't have brakes, but he wants a brand new supercharger on his engine, we're going to say no.
We always sell that as one package. We're only going to give you the supercharger if you get these brakes.
Yeah, it's like we're not adding a lot of go unless you got whoa.
Yeah.
you need that. They're equally as important. And so you always want to do safety checks, make sure that the suspension's held together well, make sure the brakes are solid before you do any kind of performance. And we had one guy that came in and had all this work done to his motor, wanted the brakes redone, but he didn't have seatbelts in the car. It was a 72 Ford, I think it was, and it
had a lap belt or nothing.
Nothing, not even mounts for seatbelts. They redid the whole interior and got rid of the seatbelts because he didn't like them.
Okay.
I was like, okay, well, that's where we would start.
Yeah.
We would like you to be safe inside the car.
That's really good to know, though.
Yeah, well, I thought you were going right to fuel injection because most people are like, I just want it to start every morning. I'm sick of dealing with the carburetor every day.
Yeah, and that's a lot. A lot of guys come to us and say, I want to just turn the key. And go.
Yeah.
And so fuel injection is kind of like that first stop where you get a brand new setting unit, all new fuel lines, and then you have this, system that looks like original carburetor, but it's kind of undercover. It's all electronic.
Gee, no propping the flap open on the choke anymore with a screwdriver and trying to start it like I used to have to do.
No, not at all. I still do that with my Chevelle because I have a whole fuel injection system for my Chevelle. It's just sitting there.
You haven't done it yet.
Isn't
that the way it always is? You don't have time to do your own car.
Yep. And technically, it's my wife's Chevelle, so she always makes me remember that. But
I've got one other thing I wanted to ask you about.
Before
Go ahead. ahead, please.
I did have an interesting. Like, do you have a lot of people come to you for like EV stuff these days?
So I've had a few people reach out to me about electronic vehicle conversions. That's the next forefront for resto mods. There's a few companies that do it. One of the companies that we're partnered with is called Revolt, and they make a full EV drop-in
That's
system.
Lancaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a story with them.
So
Greg did.
they drop in EV systems in all the cars.
Batteries and everything.
Everything. But the price point is really high still because the market isn't there yet.
Right.
So
And the batteries are the most expensive parts.
yeah, I mean,
But you've got to redo everything
Yeah.
electrically.
Yeah, everything gets redone. So the 12-volt system that's in the car can stay.
Right.
Granted, it is a 12-volt system.
Right.
It can stay, and everything else should piggybacks off it. But, a lot of the drive lines and stuff to get into that market are, just sub $100,000 for the drive line. So it prices people out very quick. But I see the prices every month go down on batteries and engines and things like this. So it's
Are they younger buyers? In other words, we always talk about any kind of street rods, any kind of classic cars where the age group has always been fairly old and not necessarily getting younger. Are you seeing any younger buyers coming in and asking for that kind of conversion?
So I see a kind of the gamut of age range.
That's good to hear.
We see a good bit of younger generation wanting to have the classic look, but the EV systems.
Right.
It's still out of their price point right now.
But
their interest is
they're
there.
interested.
Yeah, the interest is there. The older clientele generally like their Tesla, like their EVs that they have, and they're a little tired of the fuel smell or the exhaust note, or they wanted to have something that's kind of on the forefront of the engineering spectrum. So that I think is more of a status thing than anything.
Which is what the Tesla, probably when they bought the Tesla, that was
exactly.
it too.
It's kind of a flex.
There was one other thing that I personally want your opinion on, and that is ceramic coatings.
Okay.
Are they worth it? Are they as durable as people say? I've lived through dealers putting all kind of extra coatings on your cars over the years. Some were good, some were bad. Is a ceramic coating really a ceramic material, and is it that much better than what, say, you could get 20 years ago?
So ceramic has come a really long way in a short time. There's consumer ceramics, which you can get in spray bottles you can put on your car, and it just gives a layer of film, essentially, over top of it's like a super wax.
Okay.
Most of the consumer stuff you get that you can spray on your car after you wash it and wipe it down, that's going to last anywhere from 3 to 4 months on the
Well, that's
on the
actually
high
not
end.
bad.
Yeah, and it's if you treat it well.
Right.
If it's in the elements and you don't wash it down regularly, it's not going to last as long. Then you have what they call like the extract. It's the potent actual oil that is the ceramic. That has to be installed by a professional because it has to be heated to a certain temperature. And it's laid out evenly over the panel with a little tiny, tiny sponge that has the right set of membrane in it to push the fluid out. Once that's heated up, it self-levels across your panel, and they have a version of that is super potent that can last up to 7 years, and they have a intermediate version that's about 3 years.
How do you tell if somebody knows what they're doing about putting ceramic coatings on? Because to me, that's got to be, it has to become in the application. It's like any paint job.
Yeah, I mean, there's a craft to put that on. I've seen dealerships put it on cars, and when you rinse the car off, you'll see the water bead off a panel, and then you'll see a swipe where there's no ceramic, and it's just sticking. So that person didn't follow the path and didn't stick it on right. A car that has ceramic, if you spray water on it or even mud, you'll see it just go right off the panel, like it's on wet glass. That's the really only way to tell. When someone says they can do it and they put it on, it can look convincing.
And I know I don't usually ask folks in your situation prices, but you see all kind of price ranges. When do you know you're paying? Well, I should say, if someone says, how much does should a good ceramic coating on an average car cost?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Well, again, depending on the potency of the product
Right.
and the skilled labor that you're paying for. If it's someone who's invested in the heat lamps and the booth to do just ceramic coating, you could expect to pay anywhere between $1,500 and $3,000
Okay.
for the exterior.
So if someone says $300, that's not
That's not the good stuff.
That's not the good stuff.
No, that's not the good stuff, or they're using you as a guinea pig to learn it.
Right.
So as long as you go into that knowing it, it might be worth the $300 to see how it turns out.
Okay. Who wants to be a guinea pig?
They have incredible products. We did my wife's brand new Grand Cherokee L. We did ceramic interior and exterior.
Interior.
So he did all the seats. He did all the piano black that's impossible to keep clean.
Yeah.
You can do pliable materials. I
They
didn't know that.
have ceramic based materials for everything now.
So is that like putting it on like piano black? Because we keep seeing so
Oh,
much
God,
piano
yeah.
black, and
yeah.
even some of our press cars come already scratched.
Yes.
yeah.
So we
will that
did
help?
hers the week we got it.
Right.
Because I know piano black and it's awful.
It's like, why are they putting it in cars?
And it came back. It was gone for a while, and everyone was happy. No one asked for it, and they brought it back. I'd rather have a painted surface than piano black.
Me
But
too, or something with some kind of a relief to it, or something that
Yeah,
adds some
something.
character instead of just, hey, let's put some fingerprints on that.
and here's a giant door you have to touch to close. That's all piano black.
Yeah. Yep.
But we did that, and I mean, it still smudges, it still marks, but it wipes off.
Good.
So it's good stuff.
I know that's a big worry for a lot of people with the piano black, because we have been seeing it in so many cars, like Kia, Hyundai. they
Everybody's
love it.
using
Everybody's
it.
been doing it.
When it first came, it was great because it was something different until the first time you drove it, and you realized this is going to be a nightmare.
Yeah. And the dust
very
just
interesting.
sits
And the
on
other
it.
one, I guess, a new surface that's I'm wondering how it's going to hold up is all these cars coming in with open pore wood.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering what are they doing there for durability? Because the whole idea of putting a finish over wood is so it'll last.
Yeah. Even finished wood in the cars from the 50s didn't last.
No,
I mean,
cracks.
by 65,
I mean-
they were cracked and splitting.
Right, it's all the heat.
But how much of like? I kind of look at it and I'm like, it doesn't look like real wood. Like how much?
Well, it
of
doesn't.
Is
It looks
how
like
much is
plastic.
real
It
wood?
looks like a laminate flooring.
Yes. So like, is it?
My hope is that it's some
real
kind of composite.
Yeah, I
that's
would
made to look
imagine
like
it's
it.
mostly,
Yeah,
especially on
but
the
they-
cheaper stuff that,
Yeah.
when you're talking
they
like
can't say
Bentleys
that.
and
They can say they
And the-
can't call it wood if it ain't wood.
I
I mean,
guess.
we've lived through fake wood, laminated wood, all sorts of stuff. Anyway, doesn't really matter. I'm sure it's probably got enough wood in there that they can legally say it's wood.
I know flooring companies only have to have an X%
Yeah.
of wood in their material for it to be solid wood.
Well, I mean, most wood floors are veneer these days. So, and they may have wood fiber in them.
Yeah.
Anywho, thank you, Daniel.
Of course.
We're going to ask you to contribute towards the rest of the show. We're actually going to start talking about a couple of vehicles that we've had relatively recently in here to test. And we're going to start with a vehicle that was talked about long before it got here, and that's the new Wagoneer L and Grand Wagoneer. And Jessica, why don't you take the lead on these big new SUVs, and did they live up to their hype?
They absolutely did. Obviously, very odd for a brand to launch a brand new vehicle and then 1 year later put an entirely new powertrain in it.
Right.
But absolutely lived up to the hype. I really, really liked the new 3-liter I-6 or twin turbo.
When I heard that Jeep was going to do an I-6, I said, whoa, this talk about throwback. Because that an I-6 was the standard bearer for Jeep forever and for the U.S. auto industry for that matter. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, was really, really impressed with it. I spent a lot of my time actually in just the standard output version, which is 420 horsepower and 468 pound-feet of torque. So, not a huge boost from the outgoing 5.7 liter. I think that was just a little bit under 400 horsepower, but just like in all ways, it felt like it performed better. It was quieter. It was just smoother. Like I remember I was sitting in some construction traffic and I like put down the window to kind of see what I could hear at idle, and it was just quiet. And in a vehicle like that, they did focus, I know Jeep specifically focused a lot on just all around just being very quiet due to the types of people who buy the extended wheelbase versions. People who are buying a Wagoneer and a Wagoneer versus a Wagoneer L are almost kind of two different clientele. Wagoneers, people buying a Wagoneer are cross-shopping 3 rows in general.
Right.
Whereas folks who are buying the extended wheelbase, they need more space.
They're looking at they're cross-shopping Suburbans or Escalade ESVs or whatever.
Exactly. So what they were trying to do is just trying to figure out ways to make it just a little bit better than the rest of the competition. And General Motors, has really been the leader in that segment for a very long time. But this really gives another excellent option to buyers because... and
they went in their history book to name it.
Yes. Yeah, the Hurricane.
That's a legendary name for Jeep.
And this is also, we talked about this being a very big engine for Jeep specifically, but this is just a big engine for the entire Stellantis brand.
What excited me was simply the fact this is no front-wheel drive engine.
Right.
This means they're committed to doing rear drive vehicles and to come out with a new engine family when everyone's going, supposedly going electric, the billions and billions of dollars that they are spending to bring that engine to fruition. That gives me hope that the market is at least going to have vehicles long way into the future for people that don't necessarily want EVs.
Correct.
Anyway.
And I think that this vehicle specifically is a really good representation of sort of like Stellantis's position on electrification. They still believe that the internal combustion engine serves a purpose. And specifically, this is a huge vehicle. And vehicles of this size will be some of the last to be properly electrified in ways that normal consumers can drive on the daily. And so for them, thinking of the two V8 powertrains, the 5.7 liter, the 6.4, those engines are old. They've been around since the early 2000s. So it was only a matter of time before, emissions catches up to you. And so that's kind of an important thing also to talk about. But I should also mention that I mentioned there's a standard output version, and then of course we have the high output version, which is aptly named the Hurricane 510, which it's got 510 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. And then so the standard output version goes in the Wagoneer L, and then the high output version goes in the Grand Wagoneer L. And then also they'll go in the non-extended wheelbase models, but the base Wagoneer still will have the V8 standard, and so will the Grand Wagoneer Obsidian. So most of the new models for 2023 will have this new engine.
That engine's going to migrate into all of their trucks, including probably some of their heavy-duty trucks. They've mapped out a long future for that engine.
And they're saying for the high output version on the highway, you're looking at an additional 2 miles per gallon. And then for the standard output, you're looking at an additional 3 miles per gallon.
That's huge.
Right. It seems like that's like just 2 miles.
That's huge.
3 miles. So you're looking at I believe, so for like the standard output version, that's 24 miles per gallon on the highway, which is very good for that class of vehicle. You can probably, I should have looked up what the like Suburban gets or something, but I know you can achieve those
typically
numbers on the highway.
and I'm off the top of my head, 18 to 20 is not unusual for those vehicles in daily use. So if you can actually prop that up by 20% or 30%, that's a big deal.
And this will have, there's an additional 12 inches of length compared to the standard wheelbase model. But this does have the most storage space behind the third row out of anything in that class. So it seems like they just did everything right with it. It looks a little odd, I will say that. The proportions are a little odd, but they took the I think, what did I say in my first drive? They like V8 power and performance, and they put it in a smaller package, and just I was just very impressed.
I can't believe it won't be too long, Dan, before somebody comes in with you and says, "Can we put the new Hurricane?"
That was my
in
first
something?
thought. Put the Hurricane in like a CJ or something.
Right.
Yeah, I was just thinking that I want to hear that
Yep.
510 with a straight pipe exhaust.
Yeah,
It's going to happen.
Those turbos would sound incredible.
they would be.
I mean, and it's what, I think, and like I sort of mentioned before, that Stellantis is really, they see a place for this, for internal combustion engines. But it's also, when we talk about sustainability, even in like the resto mod area, even just getting a little bit more fuel economy is, I think, a very good thing in the long term.
Whatever we're looking at right now doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be what we're looking at in the future as far as policy and all. So everybody's trying to play the odds.
Yeah.
Let's switch, though, to something at the other end of the scale, sort of, at least size-wise. And one of the vehicles we've had recent experience with it, I think kind of blew us all away a little bit, the Hyundai Kona N, the first time that the performance brand N from Hyundai has been applied to basically an SUV. It's really not, but let's say it is.
Can we just
a
call it a crossover?
Let's call it a tall hatchback. Make me happy.
Okay. Tall hatch.
Greg, take it away.
Yeah, it's
Kona
funny.
N.
You said it. We're like literally going from the biggest vehicle. You can think. We're talking a full-size extended version down to what
Something
is
that
called
could almost fit in its trunk.
What is this? This is called technically a subcompact SUV, crossover, whatever you want to call it. And then beyond that, they're like, well, let's just make it an N version and make it a hot hatch. That's not really a hot hatch.
But it is.
It is. It is.
If you look back at the
it, it's a
original hot hatches, they were all square and upright like the original. Anyway, go ahead.
You look at this thing and you don't think SUV. You think hot hatch. It sits a little bit high, but you're like, okay, it's still a hot hatch. It's a cocky little thing. A lot of power coming from the 2-liter turbo 4, 276, if you want to get down to the numbers, 276 horsepower, 289 pound-feet of torque. But actually, it can go up to 286 pound-feet because of a little button called NGS, which is known as N-Grin shift.
Yes.
I had to look that one up when I got in the car. I'm like, what does NGS even stand for? I mean, I love a good boost button on the wheel, and this one's like a nice size. It's kind of like the GV60, what's Genesis's all-electric one now?
That's the GV60.
Yeah,
The little one?
GV60.
Yeah.
I get they are really starting to confuse me with the numbers. Anyway, it's like essentially for a few seconds, you get 10 extra horsepower.
It's
so
like
if
a
you're
little
accelerating-
nitro simulation.
Yeah, and it makes sense in this car because it's so hyper. I mean, on the street, it is, even in its softest suspension setting, it just likes to bounce around.
I thought it
stiff.
was like old time Detroit rough. When you used to see a performance pack put on something from Detroit, you knew you better have your teeth in right.
It was
K car with a turbo.
Yeah, a K car with a turbo.
This is not a car for a comfortable jaunt to the grocery store or a nice Sunday drive. I mean, you have to drive this thing with some purpose, or at least just be used to punishment. Because, like I said, even in its softest setting, it really bounces around on the road. And that brings me to really the tunability of this thing from the driver's seat is just being able to sit there with, all right, I have an N driving mode, which already puts you into the stiffest suspension setting, tightest steering, looser on the traction control, but you can program it. So like on the track we were on, and we'll get to the track in a little bit, we were at the Shenandoah circuit at Summit Point Motorsports. And it's a little bumpier than some of the other tracks. So actually, I would take it back down to the softest suspension setting and then keep the engine transmission in its sportiest setting. And that seemed to work out. But just being able to do that all from the driver's seat, I mean, you're not getting out like adjusting things manually. Like it's just, it's not necessarily unique in the auto industry right now, but it's just something that kind of hit me on this day when I was driving it, just to be able to say, like, I can make this car what I want it to be. And also that it's like $35,000, which seems kind of ridiculous. Like the performance, if you're talking about performance, this is a bargain. I mean, for $35,000, it's a ton of fun on the track. And like I said, I don't want to sound like I'm beating it up for what it is, because I'm very happy to have like a high-strung performance car. And when you treat it as such, you really get some good fun out of it. So yeah, I think it's a bargain there. Get back to some of the numbers real quick. So 8-speed dual clutch automatic transmission, paddle shifters, front wheel drive, which is I don't love. It should be all wheel drive.
Yeah, because it torque steers like crazy.
Oh my God, the torque steer is ridiculous. Also, I should note that actually they just recalled, or this was part of a recall, the transmission. So it actually has some issue with the high pressure transmission oil pump. And just if you have one, think about it. Don't throw that piece of paper away. Yeah, exactly. But I just had to get that out there. And my final note on numbers before I get to my track impressions is the brakes, which I actually looked up, are 2 inches bigger. The front rotors are 2 inches bigger than the N line, which is a step below the N. Again, we're getting into confusing marketing terms here. So you can get a Hyundai Kona N line. Don't confuse that with what I'm talking about.
That's
the Hyundai
that's the
Kona
poser,
N.
basically.
Correct. So 2 inches bigger up front, and actually the rear brakes on this N are bigger than the front brakes on the N line, and they were serious on the track. I mean, I always expect them to kind of fade and kind of give up on something that is still like a bargain hot hatch, but they were really strong. I had more fun in this car on the track when I didn't drive it to my limits, because I felt like when I started pushing the car, it started pushing back, and I didn't like how it felt. There's a section on the track where you're going uphill, where you're heading to that fun ski jump area where you get a little bit of air, and normally I can just grip and rip up the hill, but I was full throttle, and it was torque steering all over the place, which is very disconcerting when you're going up the hill at over 100 miles per hour and about to go over a jump where you need to be very precise. And I'm getting pulled left and right the entire way up. So yeah, like I said, to me, it felt better at a casual pace. I had more fun on the track with this thing. But yeah, it's kind of a weird car, because it's just like, you got to have some like maybe naughty intentions with this thing when you buy it, because otherwise it's just like, why else would you want this?
I think it's an autocross champ.
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
that's what it's made for. That's what the original hot hatches were all about. And I think that's what this is. It's
it
a parking
understeers
lot
a little
racing.
bit. It torque steers a little bit, but it's also kind of fun in that environment of like trying to master a car. And
sounds like a fun go-kart.
Exactly.
And fun go-kart.
And you can throw it into a
that
corner.
you can put a big screen TV in. So
you're not
or maybe a semi-big screen TV.
Yeah, it's, and actually my final note is that I had asked Steven, our assistant producer, when we were at the track, and maybe Jess, you can chime in, what sounded better, because we also had the RS3 there, and inside the RS3 sounded great, but Steven seemed to think that the Kona N sounded better from outside the car at the track. And I know it's a pretty gnarly soundtrack.
I'm trying to remember, but I mean, I really liked how the Kona N sounded, because there's just so many like pops and.
Oh, I roll the windows down, man. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not usually the type of person that likes loud cars, but it has
but there's something
really
about a good old
sound.
exhaust pop.
I agree. This is like a good, like rowdy, loud. I enjoyed it.
But not too loud where you're just like
grumbly.
obnoxious. You're just like, you
don't want something droning on.
No, I don't think it drones.
It's just like, you're driving by, you push down the throttle a bit, and you get a little attention. That's the sort of no, I think it sounded great, and probably a little bit better than that Audi that we had that day.
Let's transition to our lightning round, and we're going to actually transition from something that's got very little sound at all in it, and it's still a Hyundai product. Hyundai recently announced that they're starting in their all-new 2023 Ioniq 6. Customers will be able to buy new features over the air after initial purchase. They include updates to the vehicle's powertrain components, which is relatively new, to remotely upgrading performance and capabilities. Do you think this is something car buyers and owners are interested in? I got to tell you, I've got a Hyundai Palisade. I've yet to upgrade the nav system.
John.
And, it's like you take time to get around and do it. So it's a good question, though. Do you think most owners will even have a clue, and will they do it, or is that something that they'll only happen when they take it in for service?
on a car like the Ioniq 6, I would have to imagine the buyer's already tech
Pretty
forward
savvy.
and interested in that sort of stuff. I think the idea across the industry is becoming more prevalent. But for like what you said, John, I think for something like that, nav services, I mean, it would save a lot of trouble for people, right? Like, do you have to go into the dealer, or do you have to get? Or do they send you
you've got to get
SD
a
card?
big thumb drive.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to get a big blank thumb drive to download it and then go get in your car. Now, if they could basically do it, if I could pull up to my house, hook up to my Wi-Fi, and download it in the car, and I'm not sure, maybe I can, but I don't think so. That would be different. And that would be easier. But I can, anything that requires people to do more than a few steps gets left by the wayside these days.
But the more interesting thing is the whole performance thing. Where
That's
it's
much
like
more.
you can pay for more power.
And,
I'm assuming you're saying.
suppose they get another 10% out of the battery and for range.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
The thing is, I wouldn't want to pay for some of that.
I don't like the idea of it. I'm trying to understand what they're saying here. Now that I understand it, I don't like that.
Like, I think specific to, like, say, the battery, and if they somehow found a way to
Tesla's been doing
change
that all
things.
along, where you pay extra for extra features that they can program into cars.
Tesla's.
Well, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong.
Different.
I'm saying it's not new, and I think people will not do it. I think a lot of people won't do it.
Sure. I think the people who own Teslas are they are
that's-
more than happy
they're
to do
different.
that. But I think the average consumer would not be like,
Why am I paying more? I just bought this thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a slippery slope. because-
Subscription services and stuff, yeah.
Because you have Tesla who are doing that because they're advancing. They're so new that they're advancing. As they're advancing, they're saying, okay, you came in at this price. If you want to jump to this price, we have these advancements you can have. Other companies are seeing that model. as
They
a way
want
to
the
make
money.
Yeah.
Say, okay, we can definitely get you to, an extra 50 miles per charge, but we're only going to ship it to you at this rate. If you want to pay for more, we'll get you there. And I think that's
the part I don't like.
That's the-
because I
I think
know
it's
it's at the-
backlash city.
Yeah.
whatever they say, they're like, oh, well, it's because of this or that. I have a hard time believing them. I have a hard time believing anything other than we want to make more money off of you.
in the video game world, we call it pay to play.
Pay to play.
So a lot of the video games now are seeing that format, and they sell you a game for $60, and then you're playing the game and you can't advance unless you buy this package to go any further. And it's
The car companies already went that route. When navigations first started becoming a big deal, if you wanted to get that navigation upgraded, not only did you have to go to the dealer, but you had to pay the dealer labor rates and everything else to get it upgraded.
Yep.
So most cars are running around that are older than 5 or 6 years without upgraded nav systems.
Yep.
So, I mean, the evidence is there that people don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, and subscription services, I'm not sure, but so far I don't think that's taking off in the car business.
No.
they're having a hard time getting their footing. I mean, even 2013, 2015, Dodge shipped all of their vehicles that had touchscreens nav ready.
Nav ready, right?
They had nav capabilities, but you had to buy an $800 module to plug into the back in order to get nav.
And I bet they didn't sell a whole lot
They
of
did
those.
not.
I do wonder, if a OEM makes something like that, you can tweak the powertrain components over the air. I wonder if there would be a way for anybody else aftermarket wise to just plug in and tweak it themselves.
Isn't that the $64 question?
Right.
They exist.
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
sure
gonna
they
say,
do.
Like, they have to, or if they don't exist now, they will exist because people are always going to want to find ways to somehow tweak their
Well,
vehicles.
look what's going on with car theft. Everybody thought all these anti-theft systems were perfect, and they just arrested a big car theft ring that was duplicating key fobs and going on to dealer lots to steal vehicles.
Now you can just go on TikTok and figure out how to steal somebody's Hyundai.
yeah.
They use the same RF module in the remote keyless entry as most phones use for Apple Pay.
Jeez.
Wow.
So once someone figured that crossover, they were able to emulate the key fob RF signal and get into any vehicle they want.
Oh my God! All right.
This is depressing.
I guess
Let's
I'm
move on.
happy that I have
I'm
a
not-
proper key in my car.
Yeah, it's
in the
like
mood for
anybody
this
that's still got a key,
yeah.
you're probably okay.
So I like driving a car with a carburetor.
All right, let's move on to our viewer question. We got an email from Douglas, and Douglas, I'm going to start answering this after you. After I read your question. In the review of the GV60,
I could have just looked down at this
you just
rundown
mentioned
earlier.
I mentioned plant-based leather in describing the interior seating materials. If so, just what are plant-based leathers? Is this the new version of pleather? I got to tell you, when we were writing that script, I struggled with this because to me, that's ridiculous because the definition of leather is that it's an animal hide. But this is marketing speak. And there is this, if you Google plant-based leather or, vegan leather, which I think is, I've already been told is out of fashion already, there are all sorts of products that they're making durable materials that have the texture of leather from pineapple leaves, from the roots of mushroom. I'm sure there's a lot of others. So these are artificial material. I shouldn't say that. They're naturally based materials.
Making artificial leather.
Making artificial leather. Thank you.
And it can be any, like, it's not a specific, like, percentage wise that they're calling something plant-based. It's like, it can be, 30% plant-based or it can be 80%.
There's no rules.
Yeah, there's no rules. I mean, it just is saying that there is a part of this material that is made up from like something natural.
Yeah, I don't know why. I guess, they're dealing with consumers and consumers are saying, what do you mean I can't get leather in my vehicle? Like Volvo is a big one doing this. And we've seen these materials and many of them are excellent. I mean, they're luxurious looking. It really isn't a problem. They wear well. You're not going to have the finish coming off them. It looks like as easily. They're more when you leave a vehicle. Everybody knows leather seats and heat are enemies. So I don't know. Do you think this is where we're headed?
Absolutely, I think. I mean, I think of like putting leather in a car 15, 20 years ago and what that leather looks like today. It's cracked. It looks awful. It was so hard to keep nice. And, people want more sustainable options as well. And, leather from an animal is out of fashion. And I was telling John this earlier, is that manufacturers specifically avoid the word vegan because they cannot promise that every step of the production process was absolutely had no
You were giving
animal.
an example like bee honey or something.
Yes, yeah.
So has this got a little something in it like that?
Bees, if it has a little something
The
in it.
pure vegan would say that's not vegan.
Yeah, they cannot promise that. And it's only recently that I've seen that they've kind of like gone away from that. Because I remember I was at an event relatively recently, maybe a year ago, and I think originally the PR person said, "Oh yeah, this is vegan material," but then they like backtracked and they were like, "No, actually, it's not vegan. We can't say it's vegan." So
I want to ask Dan a question though. Leather today in new vehicles is not like leather 20 years ago.
No.
I can remember Pat Goss saying it's really just more superficial. It's a surface coating almost.
Yeah. So leather back in the day was, older cars are not just leather fabric. I mean, it was leather hide.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
it was tanned
leather hide. That leather's organic. It has to be conditioned, just like your skin. If you neglect your skin and don't clean your skin, it's going to crack. It's going to get dry. Seats are the same way. Mm-hmm. So, back in the day, it was thick hide. Now it's some kind of composite that's been dyed and treated to last longer and be softer. And, with that, it doesn't...
Supple leather.
Yeah, it doesn't last as long because it's twice as thin.
Anybody that's ever gone and looked at an old Mercedes for sale, that sat out in the sun, the interior's just, it's like nothing but spider webs on the leather.
Yeah, I mean, it's the underlining fabric that they glue to it to give it density that's left.
Yeah.
The leather's gone.
The leather's gone.
So I'm curious to know what the life of the plant-based is going to be, because it's also organic. You're going to have to condition it in different ways, and I'm wondering how it will hold up to.
I guess it probably also depends upon the percentage of it, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, it could be 30% of what it is naturally based, or 80%. So
Yeah.
And we all know the car companies keep looking at ways to make things less expensive when they
That
come
too.
across something, and then the next year say, wow, we found out how to take X amount of dollars out of whatever it was.
Yeah.
So anyway, Douglas, I hope that answers your question. It has the look or the feel or the attraction of leather, but it is not an animal.
it sounded like the cotton ad. The touch, the feel.
The touch,
cotton.
there you go. All right, before we wrap things up, anybody got a rant or a rave this week? Anything that basically automotive-wise that you want to either complain about or give somebody a high five? Da, 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 da,
Trying to
da,
come
da.
up with something, but
Dan's got to have something for his first podcast.
Let
Something
me
that
ask
you like. It could be
let me
something
ask
you love. You don't have to hate it.
Something you love, or what should people not say to you when they come into your shop wanting them?
Where's the bathroom?
Where's the bathroom?
No, I'd say the biggest thing that bothers me when someone comes into our shop is their expectations. They say, "Oh, well, I saw it on TV. They did it in a weekend.
Seen it on TV.
They did it in
The
a
time,
weekend.
They did it in an hour on TV.
Yeah, I have a show
They had
in a
50
couple
people
weeks.
working on this car.
I have a show in a couple weeks, and I just want to, I want to do the frame. I want to do a motor. I want to do the suspension, custom tires.
real
wheels.
simple stuff.
I'm like, okay, that's going to be probably around 60 to 100 grand, and it's probably going to be about 3 years. And they're like, oh no, I saw it on Gas Monkey Garage. They do it in a week. I was like, yeah, if you look at the host, they go from sweaters to shorts, back to sweaters, and back to shorts before the guy gets his car back. And they're like, I just don't think that's right. I was like, well, I'll give you a name of a couple shops you can check. And they go there, and they're even longer because they're booked out 3-4 years.
Let's flip that over.
Yeah.
Somebody comes to you with a project. What do you love to hear them say?
I love them to say that they love their car, that it's an heirloom, it means a lot to them, and they want it right.
Wow.
want it right.
Actually, that sounds like a great place to end.
Love it.
I want to thank Dan Maffett for being here, Jessica Ray, our digital producer, Greg Carlos, our Over the Edge reporter, and all-around hot shoe. I want to thank everybody out there that watches and listens to Motor Week. Basically, if you are a fan of the show, you can see us just about everywhere. If you're catching this podcast and you're new, hop on over to our website at motorweek.org. And you can basically catch up on daily news, the latest test. We have almost all of our features and tests are up on youtube.com/MotorWeek. We stream the show at various places. You can go over to pbs.org/MotorWeek and see the latest episodes. Basically, if you've got a phone or a screen on your tablet, whatever, you can be a part of this show and catch us every week and catch Dan and all the new hosts that we have on the Your Drive segment as well. I want to thank our audio engineer, David Wainwright, our podcast producer, of course, Jessica Ray, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. Did I forget anything, anybody?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I think you got it.
Everybody out there, join us again. Thank you all for being a part of Motor Week.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil and TireRack.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.